It's the Arch Advocate Show for Monday. Couple of questions for you. What do you do when law enforcement doesn't do their job? What do you do when they can't do their job? Like, we depend on these people. We pay our taxes, our local taxes go to pay their salaries and to buy them equipment. What do you do when they are ill equipped or for whatever reason they can't do their job? What do you do? Do you become a vigilante? Right? Do you take the law into your own hands? It's a tough one. But better yet, what do you do when the police or the FBI or whoever refuse to do their job? All right? And even more severely, what do you do when it is law enforcement itself who is the predator? When the government that we pay for, that we elect into office, what do you do when it is them who is, the aggressors and the ones who are victimizing you? What do you do then? It's a tough one, right? Nobody wants a vigilante, right? I am not advocating vigilante justice, right? That's a dangerous proposition. You get one guy going rogue, and nothing good's going to come out of that. Right? You gotta parse this out. It's like, well, not all law enforcement people are bad. Certainly not. I had an uncle. He was a sheriff. Good man. Right? We all saw that shooting of that guy, in the hotel hallway there. He was down on his knees. His hands were up. They were up behind his head, and the guy shot him dead. We all saw that. We all saw what happened at Ruby Ridge. The FBI brought in snipers. A sniper shot an unarmed woman through a window. What was going through his head at that moment? Right? And the FBI was there because of like a bench warrant for some guy the main guy that lived there. He had a bench warrant for like an unregistered weapon. So like not a severe charge. And they brought in snipers for that. Okay, that is a clear abuse of power. And an FBI guy was killed during that incident. I look at that and I think, yeah, that's you had that coming, FBI. You had that coming. You attacked a U.S. citizen. You attacked one of the people that you were charged with the protection of. And you can sit there and say, well, we were given orders. No. You don't have to follow unjust orders. You are not to walk through your life unquestioning things. And if your masters tell you that, hey, if you want to keep drawing a paycheck, you are going to have to go along with this because we're going to go and we're going to go, arrest this man, and we're going to bring in snipers just in case. It's like you have to stop and say, well, wait a minute, what's the charge here? What did this guy do? Oh, he's got an outstanding warrant on an unregistered weapons charge in a country where we have the Second Amendment. That's when your job is to stand up and say, I'm not going to be a party to this. Fire me. Right? But if you're so beholden to that almighty paycheck, right? If you're so afraid of having to strike out on your own and be a man and form your own life, but you just want to sit and have that government job and take that government check that you're even willing to victimize the very people that you have sworn to protect, then you deserve whatever's coming to you. And more we're seeing this. It's not just Ruby Ridge, it was Waco, Texas. And there's a lot of people that say, well, yeah, that guy was running a cult and there was a huge standoff. Well, the fact is, we have no idea what was going on in Waco at the whatever place that was. All we know is that a whole bunch of federal officers showed up and burned a whole bunch of people to death. You know what I mean? What do you do? Let me tell you guys a story. This is a true story. It's happened in San Diego. I remember this. This was in the early 90s. In a town in San Diego called Crest. Not to be confused with Hillcrest. That's where all them gay fellers live. Hillcrest is in the city. Crest is in the mountains. And it's very close to where I grew up. So it's very similar. A lot of windy mountain roads and what have you. There was a crazy person that lived in Crest. And on many occasions, he was known for harassing people at the local Quickie Mart and yelling obscenities and, being a bad person. And, the cops would be called and they'd go out and they'd give him a good talking to. And then eventually this guy ran a lady off of the road with his car. And she had a baby in the car with her. Cops were called again. Nothing happened. And this went on for years. A couple of years this went on. This crazy person was threatening everybody and being an all-around nuisance. And he wasn't arrested. He was never treated or incarcerated, whatever. The police were just like, well, boys will be boys. I guess there's really nothing we can do. Nobody died, right? And finally, this crazy person followed a lady home and then she pulled into her driveway, in these little mountains. So, don't have a suburb in your mind. Like, have like a mountain home with its own like little dirt driveway. Follows her in to her driveway, gets out of his car and starts threatening her life. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your husband. Rah, rah, rah. Her husband was in the house. Now, her husband, everybody in Crest knew about this guy, right? Her husband sees this guy, knows who he is, and this man, the husband, the guy in the house, had spent 30 years of his life serving his country in the Navy, right? So he grabs his 9mm and runs out of the house. And by that time, the guy had already started pulling out of the driveway. So he gets in his wife's car and follows him and chases him down and runs him off of the road. Gets out of his car, goes up to the crazy man, and he completely empties the magazine into that man. Right? But wait, there's more. He then ejected the magazine and then placed another fresh loaded magazine into his 9mm and unloaded that into the man. Shot the man like 16, 18 times, right? Shot him a bunch of times. The man had clearly had enough, right? He'd been pushed too far. Now that man that killed the crazy man, he got sentenced to something like 20 years or life or whatever, because of the excessive nature of what had happened. And I can kind of understand that, right? Can't have, if you kill somebody, like don't reload and kill them again. But the fact is like there were a lot of things that led up to that. What do you do with that case? I remember that case vividly because I was like, you need to let the guy is clearly not going to be killing anybody else for the rest of his life. He spent 30 years in the Navy. He's never killed anybody before. That man that he killed had been threatening his community for a long time, and the police did nothing. You know what I mean? It's not like that guy's going to go around emptying magazines into other people. You know what I mean? Hey, police, do your job and that stuff won't happen. Right? So, like, case in point, what do you do? What do you do in that case when you've got a known crazy person in your driveway threatening your life and the life of your spouse? Right? Well, you're going to go vigilante. Somebody's going to go vigilante eventually. And it just happened to be this guy in that case. And though it would have been better if he just shot him once or twice, he probably would not have gotten the sentence that he got. Probably wouldn't have been convicted. Right? Hey, Your Honor, you know what? I snapped. I chased the guy down. You know what I mean? There's there were circumstances involved with that made it so it was like, yeah, this isn't really self-defense. You chased that guy down and shot him. But it's like at the same time, like, yeah, but he was threatening my whole community. I'd had enough. I snapped. The police didn't do anything. I did. You know what I mean? What do you do in a case like that? Right? Now, if it were not for the fact that happened in California, if that case would have happened in, I don't know, Texas or Idaho or Wyoming, probably a very different result. See what I'm saying? Probably. I mean, who knows? That's all speculation. But what do you do? What do you do when it's police are either unable to do their job, refusing to do their job, or they are the predators themselves? What do you do? You can't lump all police into that category. I'll tell you another story. This is one that I was a little bit closer to. I had a friend, and he was telling me a story about his personal life. He was dating a girl. This was also in San Diego, by the way. He was dating a girl, and this girl had a very jealous ex-boyfriend. This guy would, stalk him and call him on his phone, and somehow he had gotten his number or whatever, and the guy that was stalking my friend had just become a police officer. He made it through the police academy there in San Diego, so now he had a gun and a badge, and he calls my friend, gets his answer. Back then it was an answering machine or voicemail. I'm pretty sure it was an answering machine. And he leaves this long message, right? A audio recording telling this guy, hey, I'm a policeman now, and I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to make it look like you were a criminal, and I'm going to cover up all the evidence. Like, he left this whole big long message, right? Like, what an asshole. So my friend, he calls the police department, and he says, listen, you've got one of your people threatening my life. Here's the recording. And what did the police department do? Oh, they snatched that dude up quick and kicked him out. And then he was, charged with, because it's against the law to threaten people's lives. He was charged. So it's like in that case, you have to look at the police department and be like, good, you did the right thing. Good job, police. Right? But the fact is that guy made it all the way to the finish line as far as, getting through the academy and becoming a police officer. So that's an indication that there's going to be a percentage of people, however small or however large, there's going to be a percentage of people who have screws loose, that are walking around with a badge and a gun. That's a problem, right? What are you going to do? How do you decipher that in that moment? You know what I mean? If you've got a police officer or an FBI, if the FBI is outside of your property and you know that you haven't done anything wrong and they've got snipers and helicopters and whatever, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Right? What do you do when it is law enforcement and government who are the aggressors? That's a terrible proposition. And this is why the founding fathers said, a well-regulated militia, you have the right to bear arms. It was specifically to keep that particular problem in check. Right? Who watches the watchers? You know what I mean? Who oversees the overseers? It's the people. That's what the Second Amendment is about. Right? You have to let people know, like in that Ruby Ridge case. It's like, hey, FBI, one of your own was killed because you people were attacking the very people that you were there to protect. And you got what was coming to you. A man lost his life because you were there to encroach on the freedoms of the American people. We have to send a clear message that we love the police, right? We love law enforcement. We love our military. And if you step out of line, there are 100 million of us who are armed and trained to keep you in check. And if you are not gathered together with those people, you're gonna be left out in the cold. The biggest problems with Ruby Ridge and Waco, Texas, were that those people were isolated, right? But there was that other thing that went on. What was it, Montana? When those ranchers formed together and they had a standoff with the FBI. And guess what the FBI did? They backed the F off. because a group of people, a militia, an armed militia, showed up and said, nope, no, you will not be encroaching on people's freedoms today, FBI, and damn you for presuming that you could do something so horrific as to encroach on another man's freedom. Now, why did I tell you all this? Here's why. This is things. There's things going on that are particularly disturbing. We've seen the revelations recently in the Catholic Church. It's certainly not exclusive to the Catholic Church, right? But it's more egregious when it is the church because of the expectation that we have of that organization. Right? If there should be any place outside of the womb that a child should be safe and protected, cared for, nurtured, and educated, and formed into a productive, good member of society, it should be a house of worship. That should be the second most safest ground that a child can stand on. The first being the home, right? And here we have not only multiple, ongoing, horrific attacks on children, rapes, grooming and conditioning of innocent children. It's demonic. It's demonic. And what form did the demon choose to take? The holy man. Right? And if that's not riveting enough, if that doesn't shake you to your core enough, it gets worse. That story gets much worse. See, those demons that attack those children, hundreds of them, and thousands of victims, and decades, if not centuries, of abuse. If that doesn't shake you to your core, then it gets worse. Not only did that happen, but the hierarchical structure that those demons were operating in came to the aid of those demons. Right? I have a very good friend who he's a minister in the Catholic Church. He's not a priest. He's married. He has kids, but he wears the collar. Wears the the black shirt with the white collar. Whatever. He's a minister, man of God, loves God. Right? Loves Jesus. And he posted a thing on social media the other day. It said, we don't. People, he said, people ask me, why is it that I don't leave the church because of all the scandal? And he said, and the answer was, well, because I don't walk away from Jesus because of Judas, right? That's fair. That's fair. I agree with that. That's right. I don't believe that people should exit. I don't believe that Catholics should walk away from the church. I don't believe that they should abandon their beliefs. I don't believe that they should abandon that organization. Actually, what I believe is much more severe, much more grave. Right? What do you do when the very people that you have entrusted with your protection, in this case, spiritual protection, what do you do when the very people that you have paid money to, you've paid your tithe, you've shown your commitment, you show up every Sunday, you're a part of the community, you've put your trust in these men to protect and guide your children when you are not there? You have assigned to them that awesome responsibility of father. When I am not around, then my sons still have to have a father, and I'm going to pass that along to you the same way that we do with coaches. Right? that office of coach, right? When you send your kids to football practice or soccer or lacrosse or whatever it is that you send your kids to, that office of coach, it's why we give them so much respect. That's why I was saying, on another episode, like when we see the coaches of our children at the grocery store, at the gas station, whatever, we don't call them by their name. We don't, hey, Mike. We don't do that, do we? We refer to them as their title. Hey, coach. Right? You see Mike Ditka in an airport. You raise your hand and say, hey, coach. Right? That word, coach, it means surrogate father, second father. And when those other fathers have been abusing your children, and the organization that they belong to covers for them, and thus incentivizes that behavior, what do you do? What do you do when the very top of that tree of hierarchical structure, of chain of command, when it goes all the way to the very top, and those people have been found to be covering for the demons who have been attacking children, what do you do? Right? Because it's a bit more severe of a case where it was like, well, we just, some really bad things happened because we were ill-equipped. We didn't know what was happening. That would be bad enough. Right? Your kid gets traumatized for the rest of their lives from that moment on. Right? Because life is full of struggles for everyone. Right? Life is hard, man. Most of the time, it sucks. It's so difficult. But here's this innocent little child, right, who has yet to find out that life is just full of tragedy and horror and uphills and closed doors and windy roads. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden somebody comes along and says, I'm going to lump this shit on you that is going to make it so that for the rest of your life, you're always going to have to deal with this horrific thing. That's bad enough by itself. That if that happens and the answer that you get is, well, we were just, very sorry, but we were ill-equipped, that would be enough to burn the whole house down. What do you mean you're ill-equipped? Right? But it wasn't that. Right? Nor was it the second worst thing. Or I'm sorry, that was the third worst thing. So I'm counting up backwards. Third worst, second worst, first worst. The third worst thing would be like, well, we're sorry your kid got raped. We were just ill-equipped. Okay, fine, then you're fired. All of you need to go home. Right? That would be enough by itself to lay down that judgment on those people. But it wasn't that. Nor was it the second worst thing of, well, we did see it and we just did nothing. We just chose to just not do anything at all. Right? If it were that, that would be reason enough to call for blood. If that was to happen, that would be reason enough to band together, get together with all of the other dads, form a group, and start executing people. You just said that you not only did my son get raped by a demon dressed as a holy man, but you knew about it and you chose to do nothing. That by itself would be enough to cause a man to get together with the other fathers, the other dads, the other biological parents, and say, all right, we have to get in there and fix this. We can't have this going on in our church. But it wasn't that either. It was the very worst possible outcome. And that is that the abuse itself was coming from the top. That the structure itself was incentivizing the abuse of those children by covering for those demons. covering for those demons and moving those demons around so as to be protected, thus sending a message through the whole organization that, hey, if you do this, we're going to make sure that nobody knows about it. We're going to make sure that you still have a job, that you still have a title. You're going to be taken care of by the head of the organization. That's what happened. What do we do? What do the Catholic people do? You know what I mean? Whatever it is, it can't just be one person. That's vigilantism. Right? You can't have one person losing their mind and committing justice on people by themselves, because it's not justice when you do that. It's just one guy who's been pushed too far, and now his screws have come loose, and he starts wasting a bunch of people. That's what happened in Crest. Right? You can understand it. I can certainly understand why that guy became so violent that he put 2 magazines full of bullets into that crazy man. I can understand it, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, look, there's a reason why we have laws against that. And although I understand it, and I do not believe that that guy should have gone to prison, and I certainly don't agree with the amount of time that he was sentenced to, you know, I certainly understand why society has built rules around, like, this is why we don't do this. This is why we have a well-regulated militia called the police. This is why we pay taxes. This is why we pay our local taxes, so that those guys can have badges and guns and cars and bulletproof vests and all that stuff. That's why we do all this. This is that function, so that we don't have one guy losing his shit and emptying 2 clips into somebody, right? But the thing is like, it's like when you drop the ball so bad and when you refuse to do your job so bad, that's what you're going to get. And when it's found out that it's coming from the top, you're going to have an insurrection on your hands. You're going to have a group of Catholics. This is coming very soon, people. This is coming very soon. Like, if this doesn't happen, I will be shocked. Catholics are good people. Catholics are devout people. And Catholics have been told all these years, like, listen, if you speak up against this, you're going against the church. If you speak up against this, you are speaking evil of the pontiff himself. God's chosen. The Pope is infallible. If you speak up against this, you are going up against the Pope. And therefore, you are going up against the very representation of Jesus Christ on this earth. You cannot commit that sin. That's what they've been told, and that is why they have remained silent. But you can't push people that far. The Catholic people have been pushed as far as a man can be pushed before he goes over the edge. It is my sincere and strong belief that you are about to see a great deal of men who have been pushed over the edge, taking the law in their own hands collectively. That they're going to do it collectively, and when that happens, society will see. Like, you can take one man, like the man in Crest, you can take that one guy and be like, yeah, that guy lost his marbles. Yeah, let's put him in a cage for a while. He's unsafe. You get 20, 30, 40 men together, and now you have a built society. You put 20 men on trial, and the whole world is going to have to look at that and be like, well, how did 20 people come to this conclusion? Or did they all simultaneously lose their shit and decide to meet up at the local Waffle House and talk shit out? If and when that happens, and I sincerely believe that it will, because it's too much now. The recent revelations about what's been going on in the Catholic Church, it's too much. People have been pushed too far. And whether this happens in Italy, whether it happens in Croatia or Austria or France or England or Massachusetts or Ohio or wherever it goes down, it will be a group of people together, and that changes the dynamic of how you go about prosecuting people. Because when it's one man, it's a vigilante, and all of us as a society, we can dismiss that and be like, that guy he just lost his marbles. But when it's a group of people, it's like, oh, they formed a little society. And they labeled themselves as law enforcement, which is the right of any community to do. Right? That's why we have like those laws that we have in America. Those are American laws, but if it happens in other countries, everybody's going to look and be like, well, that's village justice. That's the significance of a village protecting itself. And when a community comes together, that's a whole different legal process. It's a whole different narrative. Because it takes away that narrative of like, oh, he just lost his marbles. It's like, nope, that's not what happened. A whole bunch of dudes did that. A whole bunch of men got together and grabbed a priest that they knew was demonically victimizing young boys, and they dragged him out into the street and executed him in front of everybody. Right? That sends a message to the head of the organization like, hey, we're done with this. We are over this, whatever period of our church history that we've been living through, it's over. Right? I believe that you're going to see that happen very soon. Right? Like, I'm not hoping for it well, I don't know. I suppose I am, but I just know human nature. It's like when you get pushed too far, right? When you get pushed over the edge, things start getting real weird, real violent, real quick. Real quick. And I think that you're going to see that. Now, that's not actually what I wanted to talk about. That was just kind of the setup, the preface, if you will. These strange times that we're in, there's been a number of things that would paint the picture that what's going on in our country right now, it's not just a failure in the social contract, but there's something actually spiritual happening right now, very spiritual indeed. And for those of you that have a spiritual life, I strongly recommend to you that you become more secure in that, because these things are just going to get worse. I said all that about what's been going on in the Catholic Church and that guy in Crest and all that because, look, I made this point before. The federal government has over $40 billion a year that is allotted to subsidizing child protective services and everything that goes with it. And there's a lot that goes into that. There's lawyers and judges and caseworkers and foster care parents and whatever. But it's $40 billion. Now, you have to think about this. That's over $40 billion in government subsidy, just for that one thing. And because of that, there are tens of thousands of missing kids and sex abuse going on in the foster care system, and it's being subsidized with tax dollars. Now, if you're an atheist and you're just a complete pragmatist and whatever, fine. Let's start off there then. Anytime there's government subsidy, anytime, there will always be two things present, and that is fraud and waste, right? Case in point, right? We have farm subsidies. Excuse me really quick. We have farm subsidies, in our country, and that's all directed by what's called the CFTC, the Commodities Futures Trade Commission. And what farm subsidies are for, right? Let's say you grow corn, right? You live in Nebraska and you grow corn. Very good, right? Americans eat a lot of corn. The whole world eats a lot of corn. And the thing is that if all of a sudden everybody in the world decides to grow corn, then corn will have no value, right? Because there'll be so much corn that there'll be no competition in the corn market. You understand? Right? If every farmer in the world just decided to stop growing whatever they were growing and decided they were all going to grow corn simultaneously, then when that crop came in, corn would have next to zero value. And every one of those farmers would lose money. They would lose all the money that they spent on the seeds and the watering and the harvesting and the shipping and the canning and everything that went in. They would all lose all of that money. Now, how do you fix that problem? Well, you have to make sure that there's only a certain amount of people that are allowed to grow corn. That way you can keep kind of a stranglehold on the price. That's a good thing, right? Because we want those farmers to make money because we need them to grow corn next year. And if they lose their ass because everybody decided to grow corn, that's bad for everybody. Now all of a sudden we have a whole bunch of farmers getting foreclosed on their farm. And now we don't have any more farms. Ipso facto, we don't have any more food, right? So the Commodities Futures Trade Commission, they send people out and they come to you. Let's just pretend you're a corn farmer. And they say, hey, Todd, or Mike, or, Derek, or, whoever, JK. They say, look, how much money did you make last year on your corn crop? And he says, by the time it was all said and done, my profit was $60,000. They say, okay, cool. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay you $60,000 to sit on your ass this year and don't do anything, right? That's how it works. That's how subsidy works. We're going to pay you to not grow anything. We're going to pay you to not do anything at all. Why? Well, because, we've decided how, we have a chart, we have a formula here. We're going to pay these people to not do anything. That way the people that do grow corn can make a good profit, right? And everybody's happy. That's how subsidies work. So it's a good idea, right? The idea is good. The idea is right. However, here's what happens. Because of all that money that's set aside for farm subsidies is sitting there, and it's run by a bureaucracy, right? These are people who are not farmers, right? They're economists. And, the people that work for the economist are people who are the type of people who take federal jobs or government jobs or whatever. Like they're not exactly, entrepreneurs. They're people who just want to draw a paycheck and go home and be left alone. That's who works for bureaucracies. Like when you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles, you see those ladies sitting behind the desk, that is a government worker. That's the kind of person that takes government work. They're not bad people, but they're just not, they're not go-getters. Let's just leave it at that. Right? So what happens is somebody comes along and they see that there's this big pile of money that the government just gives away to farmers to keep them from growing crops to control the price. Right? They're called attorneys, and they're like attorneys who are financial attorneys. They're like financial advisors with law degrees. And they go to their client, their rich client, like a baseball star. Some guy that's making $50 million a year, and it's like, well, we have to put your money somewhere. We got to put it in real estate. We got to put it, we need to make your money make more money. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go buy some real estate. So bing, number one, right there, you're protecting your assets, right? You buy land, you can't lose money, right? We're going to go buy land in Nebraska. We're going to buy 200 acres in Nebraska. Well, why Nebraska? Well, here's the thing. Once we own that land, we are going to file paperwork to the government so that we can get farm subsidy. The government is going to pay you to not grow crops on that land because the government has to help in the regulation of price when it comes to corn. Right? And the baseball star says, yeah, but I don't have any, I'm not going to grow corn. And the lawyer says, doesn't matter. It's free money, man. It's free. Right? So they will fraudulently file paperwork. Now, when I say fraud, I mean legal fraud. There's no way to prove that that baseball player had no intention of growing corn. There's no way to prove that. But it is fraud nonetheless. Right? And waste. It's waste. Your tax dollars, my tax dollars, goes to pay that rich baseball player to not grow corn, and he never intended to anyways. And he probably wouldn't have even bought that land if his lawyer hadn't told him to, his financial advisor. Fraud and waste. Right? That's what makes it evil. Right? This love of money, it creates this evil where it's like, now I have to pay tax dollars to keep, Jake Peavy from growing corn. That money could have been used on a whole menu of different good, holy purposes, but instead it went to go pay Jake Peavy to not grow corn, and he never intended to grow it in the first place. And why did I just tell you all this? Back to CPS, $40 billion a year. Over $40 billion a year that is going to CPS. And people have investigated this, and people have been murdered for investigating this. There is some dirty stuff going on here. There was a San Diego man, some sort of attorney, and he wrote this whole piece on this. He said, listen, here's how it works. The states have an incentive to take children away from their homes. Because when a child is taken out of their home and placed in foster care, the federal government guarantees $6,000 per month for that child. Right? That's a lot of money. That's $72,000 a year for one kid. $72,000 is a life-altering sum of money. And in this case, it changes a lot of lives. This man went on to write in his findings that, so the federal government sets aside $6,000, and this is going back to Bill Clinton. This is what Bill Clinton had put into place. $6,000. Right? So between the federal government and the actual foster home, the person who owns that, the foster parent, between the federal government and the foster parent, that $6,000 washes all the way down, and by the time it gets to that foster parent, they get $600. It's 10%. Where did all that other money go? There's $6,000. There's $6,000 there, and between the Fed and the foster parent, $5,400 gets taken away. It never reaches that kid. The foster parent gets $600, and out of that $600, that foster parent has to pay for food and clothing and transportation and everything else. Where did the rest of that money go? Well, it went to administrative fees. It went to lawyers. It went to judges. It went to law enforcement to take the kid away from their parents. It went to a lot of different people. There are a lot of different mouths on that corn on the cob, and they're all eating it. Big money. So there is an incentive for state governments to encourage law enforcement to take children away from their parents. Oh, Pete, come on. Nothing so demonic could be happening. $6,000, $72,000 a year per head. That's per head. Okay, so do the math, right? $72,000 a year. What did I tell you that the foster kid, the foster parent got? $600. $600 times 12. What is that? 6,000, 6,600. Boy, I probably could have done that right in my head. $7,200. From 72,000, boy, that was really dumb of me to do that math. From $72,000 that is allotted to that kid, 7,200 of it is gone. Right? What is that left? That's over $60,000 that's left per head. That's going to pay a lot of salaries. There's a huge incentive for the government to come in and take your children, and it's happening. Ex-foster child. This story is many months old. This goes back to February, but Arizona is apparently the worst of the offenders when it comes to this fraud and waste that's going on as it applies to child protective services and foster care. Evidently, more kids get taken away from their parents in Arizona than any other state. But it's not to, listen, it's not to, I don't care where you're from. You could be living in Wyoming with a population of 500,000. Listen, it's happening in your state. And you need to be aware of this, and you need to fight against it, because this is demonic. There is a life-altering sum of money on the table, $40 billion that's sitting there on the table, and all these people have to do to become evil, to become demonic, is just to give in to the same drive that we all have, that I need more money. You put $40 billion on the table, people will lose their ethics. They'll lose their religion. They'll lose their minds. That's a lot of money. The temptation is too great. Especially if you're already a weakling. You're a politician. You're the type of person who wants a government job. Right? You're already you're not like a strong person who is going to strike out, and you're going to do your own thing, and you're going to forge a life out of this life that you have. You know what I mean? Like, you're not that kind of person. You're the kind of person who wants a bureaucracy type of job. You're already, like the kind of person that can't fend for themselves, and somebody comes along and says, hey, there's a $40 billion pot of money sitting here. You can have some of it. All you got to do is you have to look at those parents over there and figure out a way to judge them and say, we're going to take your kids away from them. Oh, and by the way, there's actually, you might want to look into this. There's no recourse for the parents. There's no way, it's written into the law. You're not allowed to charge the government with a crime if they come and take your children away. There was a young girl, this is what I'm getting at. There was this precious 2-year-old girl that was taken from her parents and given to a man. This is ex-foster child of convicted pedophile files for a $15 million claim against Arizona DCS, Department of Child Services. This 2-year-old girl was taken from her parents and placed in the foster care of one David Frodsham, Frodsham. He was a foster parent, and he was running a child pornography ring out of his house. And he takes this 2-year-old little girl and makes child pornography out of her. And then it turns out this little girl who had been moved again ended up with third-degree burns all over 80% of her body. This is what's going on in foster care in America. And how did this man end up with it? This guy has a whole seeded history where, look, I don't want to get too far into it because he had already been deemed like mentally unfit. He was, I guess, he was some sort of contractor in Afghanistan many years ago, and he was rejected by the army for sexual misconduct and for being a weirdo. And somehow he came back to the States and became a foster parent. And he was receiving your tax dollars. Your federal income tax was paying this man. You and I were paying this man. Do you understand? He was receiving federal funds and he was taking innocent children and making child pornography out of them. He was caught, thank God. But the fact is there's a $40 billion scheme in place. It's being funded by the federal government, and there's already child trafficking rumors and allegations being made about the Clintons, and this all stems from Clinton. Bill Clinton, in his administration. There is some demonic shit going on right now where not only are the police ill-equipped to deal with it, and not only are there cases where the police, they just ignore it, but there are cases where it is law enforcement, in this case CPS, Child Protective Services. That is a law enforcement agency. And they are coming into people's homes and taking their children so that they can put them in foster care. Because that child represents $72,000 a year, which keeps them employed, keeps their agency running. It keeps their lawyers and their judges paid. There's a financial incentive here, and it's going on to where it's the first worst scenario where it is the law enforcement itself who are the predators. How much longer do you think it's going to take? Right? I don't know. I mean, this isn't as glaring as a problem as what's going on in the Catholic Church, because there's not a lot of people that have heard about this. That lady that I keep citing, Mrs. Schaefer, who was murdered in her home with her husband, and it was listed as a murder-suicide. She was killed for investigating the Clintons on child sex trafficking. She was the one who brought it to light that there's over $40 billion in this scheme to prey upon children and rip them from their parents' homes for any reason. Anything that they decide is abuse. Oh, are you poor? We're going to take your children away from you. It's like, whoa. And by the way, you can't say anything about it. You can't prosecute them for it. That's demonic. And there's not any news. There's no news about this. Every once in a while, you'll see a blurb on the news where, 500 school teachers got taken down in a child pornography ring. You hear the news and then poof, we're back to the Jacksonville shooting of yesterday. It just skips right over people. Right? This is the problem with the 24-hour news cycle, is that you can't keep your focus. There is some demonic stuff going on, and you need to be prepared for what you're going to do in the event that they come for your kids next. This is why you have to exercise your Second Amendment rights, all of them. Not just your privilege to be a hobbyist and own a gun. That's part of the Second Amendment, but that's not the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment is, yes, own a gun, form a militia. Oh, what do you mean form a militia? What are you, one of those Montana Freemen? No, it's right there. It's right there on the paper. Well-regulated militia, right to protect, right to bear arms. It's one thing. It's one thing. Well, how am I going to form a militia? You go to your next door neighbor. Hey, man, there's some stuff going on. I'm kind of worried. What do you say we have a meeting once a month where we just meet for 10 minutes and we just talk about Neighborhood Watch? Neighborhood Watch is militia. Right? Remember Neighborhood Watch? Do you have that in your house? Like, that's where you get together once a month or once every 3 months, and you meet up with all your neighbors and you say, hey, what are we doing to keep an eye to make sure that we don't have, drug dealers driving through our neighborhoods trying to peddle drugs. Well, what do? Well, we keep our eye out. And we have one another's phone numbers. Right? And we all know each other. And if something looks out of place, I'm going to run over to your house and be like, hey man, something's out of place. I think your kid's in danger. That's what Neighborhood Watch is. It's militia. That's how you form a militia. You just get together with your neighbors, right? You probably don't want to use the word militia because that word can scare a lot of people off, but that's what it is. You're a little military, right? For any cause, be it to protect your neighborhood, protect your children, whatever, you have to get together with your neighbors. The people that live on your street, the people that attend your church, the people in your bowling league, your softball league, the people in your gun club, your people in your car club, whatever it is that you do, right? There's going to be other people around, right? Most people don't have hobbies that are, individual, like surfing. Like, I like surfing. That is a very individualist hobby, right? Not a lot of room to form a militia there. But even in that, people get together. You get together with your friends and you bring this to mind like, hey, listen, there is a $40 billion problem here. People are coming and taking other, children from their parents, and off they go into sexual slavery in the foster care system. And why? Well, because they're $72,000 a head, like cattle. There's a huge monetary incentive for CPS to come and take your children. This is happening, people. This is not conspiracy theory. It's happening. And it's disturbing. It's disturbing because this is the thing that makes it the most disturbing is that the demons are no longer trying to hide. Right? They're doing it in plain sight. You don't have to be some sort of exorcist to be able to spot demons anymore. Like, this is something I'm good at, but like anybody can see this. Anybody can see this. $72,000 a year for one kid. It's a lot of money. That's a lot of incentive for evil. And it is happening. And it's happening right out in the open. And nobody seems to give a shit. Well, you better, right? You better. And you better know what you're going to do should law enforcement show up to your house talking about, we're here to take your kids. Right? Because that's where the rubber's going to meet the road. What are you going to do? You just going to let them take them? Let them come and take your kid off so that they can turn it into a cash cow so that they can be put into custody with David Fraudsham so that he can run a pedophile ring out of his house for $600 a month? No. No. You better know what you're going to do. You better be prepared for that because we've already seen that there are people at the highest levels of law enforcement who will gladly deprive you of your freedoms, to deprive you of your very soul, and deprive you of your very life if there's money in it for them, if there's power in it for them. You don't believe me? I mean, there's plenty of evidence. Ruby Ridge, Waco, Texas, the ranches up there in Montana, like there is plenty of evidence. I'm not saying that the whole FBI is bad. Not even saying the whole of CPS is bad, man. Listen, there are some really bad parents out there. There's parents out there that are crystal methamphetamine abusers. Somebody's got to go get those kids. It's not going to be me. You know what I mean? Because if it was me, it would be kidnapping. Right? We have to have CPS. But we can't have it like it is. We can't have $40 billion incentivizing all of these careers that stealing children is paying for. Now, look, I want you guys to go on to archavocate.com and send me an email and tell me what you think. Matthew Pink. Matthew Pink is one of the listeners, and he tends to stay on top of this stuff. And he emails me. Go on to archavocate.com, arch-advocate.com. Go down to the bottom and send me an email. Let me know what you think, and I'll try to put something together that we can kind of come together on this one and stay connected to one another. If you want to support the show, if you want to keep the show going, we need support over here. You can become a monthly Patreon supporter. You can just throw some money like on PayPal or whatever. Every little bit is appreciated. It keeps the show going. That's it for today. I've kind of talked for a while there. You guys enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.